I was thinking about all the things that, our national defense and the military and national security does in the name of defending citizens that actually undermine national security and the safety of citizens. And you've written a ton on mass surveillance. Why is mass surveillance bad for national security?
Yeah, I mean, between FISA and the Patriot Act and all these different laws that we have on the books that authorize such broad surveillance, it makes it so broad that we're not able to hone in on the people who actually do pose a threat to us. When we're collecting metadata from millions and millions of Americans, your boring text message to me telling me to come over for an interview, when we're collecting that, that's not honed in on someone who's, maybe making terroristic threats online. And it undermines one of the most vital amendments of the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment.
Rand Paul loves to say that conservatives and Republicans and libertarians should not just be worried about the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, but all these other ones matter too, particularly the Fourth Amendment. Where are we right now? Because you've seen a lot of Republicans partner with Democrats to rein in mass surveillance. Where's this administration?
Yeah, it's a really weird spot right now because, as you mentioned, we do have some bipartisan consensus that it's time to rein this in to some extent. Guys like Rand Paul and Ron Wyden in the Senate are almost always working across party lines to try and get, any sort of reforms passed. And then in the House, you've got guys like Jared Polis on the left, who's very good. Blake Farenthold, before he left, was very good on the right. But the more establishmentarian people on both the left and the right really have no interest in reforming FISA, in reforming the Patriot Act. They just essentially give it a rubber stamp every time reauthorization comes up, to the point where Tom Cotton wanted to make it so Congress no longer even had to reauthorize it, just pass it forever and ever.
We're apparently having a renewed love affair with Lindsey Graham simply because he yelled at the Democrats about Kavanaugh, but he's horrible on this issue.
Yeah, he's one of the worst. He's screamed at Rand Paul and basically called him unpatriotic over it. Peter King in the House from New York has been awful on this issue and has actually called Rand Paul unpatriotic because of this and said that we should be surveilling all mosques indiscriminately. So there's still these hardliners, both Democrats and Republicans, who want to surveil every aspect of your daily life, whether that's through facial recognition technology. We're seeing Amazon selling that to local law enforcement agencies, whether it's through license plate readers where they can track exactly where you're going, basically down to the minute, because they've got them installed at so many different intersections under the guise of combating the war on drugs. So there's so many different agencies involved between the DEA, the NSA, the FBI. It's hard to rein any of this in.
So let's talk to conservatives for a minute.
Sure.
And why should conservatives care about civil liberties? I'm thinking about Lindsey Graham's quote. It's burned into my brain as one of those fundamentally, I'll say it was fundamentally un-American sentiment. If you haven't done anything wrong, you have nothing to hide. And I'm thinking about it in the context of the deep state and how we're learning that it turns out if you give bureaucrats this unchecked power, they will use it for partisan reasons. They will use it to protect themselves against the people. Shouldn't conservatives always be concerned about civil liberties?
Totally. I mean, look at the IRS targeting conservative groups back in the day. What's to say that if you get a Democrat in the White House, the NSA or the FBI can't do the same exact thing? Target and surveil conservative groups, find out what they're doing, and kind of undermine their efforts to scale in the size, scope, and spending of the government.
President Trump has said some good things about reining in surveillance. Where are the good guys going to go from here? Because it seems like you hear people talking the right talk, but then they pass a really bad bill.
Yeah, it's frustrating because you have to cross party lines and you have to make these uncommon relationships between, like I said earlier, Ron Wyden and Rand Paul disagree on just about everything outside of civil liberties, and they understand the importance. But I think the key is that Democrats especially, because Republicans are already willing to work with the president, he's a Republican. Democrats especially have to be more willing to work with President Trump when he says things sympathetic to reforming our surveillance laws. Like when he was complaining about FISA 702 potentially scooping up Carter Page, his former aide, that should have been an opportunity where Democrats were willing to say, yes, this is an issue and we're willing to work with you on it, because all sorts of Americans are getting caught up in this dragnet and it's doing nothing to make us safer.
It is a partisan problem. There's very few Democrats that are willing to stand with Trump on anything. And I remember in the last year of the Obama administration, I was very passionate about criminal justice reform. And I was willing to sit down with Eric Holder, and of course they had to take a picture because maybe that was important for them to show them working with a Tea Party leader. But right is right, wrong is wrong. And it seems like if there's an opportunity to rein in the surveillance state, maybe put aside your political agenda for just a second.
Yeah, and I think looking at the data will ultimately lead people to come to the conclusion that you said right is right, wrong is wrong. We're not surveilling terrorists here. The Patriot Act was passed and we have these sneak and peek warrants where they're allowed to essentially delay notifying you that they're going to search. So you don't have the opportunity to exercise your Fourth Amendment right. The amount of those sneak and peek warrants that's used every year has gone up consistently since the passage of the Patriot Act, but the percentage that are actually used in terror investigations as opposed to fraud investigations or immigration investigations or drug investigations is less than 1%. So we're not even targeting the people that we should be targeting, which is the most troubling part out of all of this.
So more surveillance is making us less safe.
Yeah, and if you look at the cities that have the strongest surveillance regimes, they're actually pretty unsafe cities. For example, Baltimore has a drone that flies over the city and surveils. They have red light cameras everywhere, and they're one of the most violent cities in the country. Las Vegas, we had the largest mass shooting in our country's history. That's one of the most surveilled cities in the country because of the casinos. There's surveillance cameras at every corner you go to. So people, I think, just need to break this mental model that somehow surveillance is making us safer and think about it more from a constitutional standpoint.